Welcome back, John. As we were just discussing, so
Very good.
the
Yes.
correlation of witch hats and
Yes.
Odin. That
So
question.
yes. So my question was, why, when we think of witches, are witches wearing these black hats with wide brims?
Okay.
And is it a magical thing? And if so, I mean, does it correlate with Odin and Mercury? You know, Odin's famed for having a wide-brimmed hat. So
Uh,
yes, your thoughts would be
I
interested.
will. All right. I'll sip the last of my tea.
Indeed, a fine, fine mug. That's a lot of tea.
A very
Won't,
big mug of
won't be
tea.
sleeping for some weeks with that much tea.
All right. I had to. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you to Kay Sparrow for making me that colossal mug
Oh
of
well.
that I can. It's kind of like the equivalent of a half gallon or something like that. I don't know. It's me portions.
Well,
And let's see. So the correlation between hats. I'll start with in the medieval period. At some point, there are paintings of this, but you see this predominantly in the poor. Um, Nowadays, it's more like a hipster thing. Unless there's some rural part of the world where um, making a scarf and making a hat might not be as logical as making a longer
that's what
hat,
you mean.
kind
That's
of
what you
like
mean. Yes.
like a
Okay.
beanie. So now you have your scarf and your hat in one, and both of those will keep you warm.
So what? So wide brimmed. The brim isn't necessarily a hard brim. It's a soft brimmed hat. So it could, in effect, be flapped around the neck.
I'm not sure. See that when that comes in, I'm not too sure.
And why would you have that in Greece? Because I've got to be honest, there aren't many days when I've been in Greece where I've needed a scarf.
That is a good question. I'm probably not going to have to comment in any academic sense because
Okay.
I
But
don't know enough about Mercury and I don't know enough about Greek history and mythos. My one guess is, um, if I have to make a guess, is that could have just been an artistic influence. Um,
okay. But Mercury, we have engravings of Mercury from 2,000 years ago. Yeah, and Odin's stories, which describe the wide-brimmed hat, are certainly 1,000 years old.
let's discuss that.
So
I
it's
can,
it's early medieval.
yeah. So
Uh,
I could see that in the medieval period. I mean, the problem with the medieval period is there's a lot of things not documented.
exactly, yes.
So I wouldn't be too surprised if um, the genius of the medieval period people, they had hats. They might not be hard like mine, but
Hmm.
um, they were able
And
to
it,
make wide
hmm,
brim, and they were able also to do the whole combine your hat and your scarf thing at
that
once.
would make sense because it's a lot more technical to make a hard brimmed hat than a soft brimmed hat.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, I just thought I don't know how we got there, what we're talking about, but yeah, that was the first question of the day.
So that's the first question.
For,
But
for me to
to
you,
answer
yes.
your pre-first question, is the correlation between witches and Odin? Um,
Because of the wide brimmed
I
hat.
yes. I think that um at least because of J.R.R. Tolkien's fascination in Norse history and its influences it had on Lord of the Rings, I think that could have had an influence. I also think some of that too could have just kind of came
That's
from.
that is a good point. So yes, yes, that's what you mean. So I've assumed that because witches have been around since the Middle Ages, that they were wearing wide-brimmed hats. But actually, wide-brimmed hats on witches may have only been a Victorian thing or a Tolkien thing, which then I don't know. I don't know how old a black witch's hat is.
Well, an actual witch, I think the earliest account is Ireland's. It's like 300 AD. Uh,
The witch, oh, there's
it's
also in the
the
Bible,
first
there's a
witch
witch.
trial.
Again, witch trial.
Yeah, I think
Oh,
it's called. It starts with the name starts with a K.
pre-Christian.
It's talked about in. I Sally North told me about it when I interviewed her on her book History of Irish Magic. Um, and so yeah, so there was a witch. So in the early couple centuries of Christianized Ireland,
Mhm.
um, there were still druids and there were still witches. Witches, although appear to be, according to her, a British th an English thing. People from England. Um, I like your face that you're making.
I would have challenged someone telling me that.
It sounds as though the words kind of meant the same thing. I think it was just a reference to a
Yes, yes, there is
magic
something
user.
ambiguity in the word witch, and what is a witch the same as a sorceress or
Yeah, I
as
think
such? Yeah,
kind of it's one of those
enchanter.
all roads lead to Rome. They all mean some person who is a very specified magic user, like a job title. Um, like it's just a position you earned, not just the farmhand that might claim to know a spell or two. Like this is somebody
Hmm.
who's
Who's bought?
ordained
Yeah.
in some officialized way. But yeah. So yeah, they appear to have for just the sake, but we'll keep it just for the sake of an argument. They appear to have coexisted, came from two different cultures, living in a Christian country, um, and she was put on trial. The reason why that witch hunt, it wasn't because she was a witch, it was because she was accused of poisoning somebody. Um, so I Um, she's not depicted as our modern idea of wearing a witch hat. There, what's become the witch
Mm.
hat.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. Yes, yes.
Yeah. I think also maybe some of the influences too, um, it did originate from that colonial, that like 14 to 1600s period, of people like Nathaniel Hawthorne looking back and writing like the House of Seven Gables because people had these huge hats too back then.
Yes, there could have been some of that. I mean, we don't actually see it in art. Um, I understand till certainly the 19th century. So,
So
so did the classic witch's hat. So there's sort of influences there, but actually the witch's hat is a probably a made up thing based on exaggeration and alike that artists must do to get specific points across,
that
and has nothing to do with Odin. Then I would
it
say,
could have nothing to do with
or very little.
it could just be
Yes,
Odin's big influence in terms of his looks, his
or just
fashionable
coincidence.
influence.
Yes, who knows? Coincidence or influence? That
Yeah.
should be a game someone brings out at Christmas. Uh,
It's gonna be,
right.
we'll get started on that. Influence or coincidence.
Yes, I like
The
that.
historical guessing game. Um,
Indeed.
how much do you really know about history? Yeah, I think it's something that has a real influence that caught on to that eventually had like a meet that's my personal argument because you don't really see this coming out
Hmm.
until about like the very end of the 1800s into the 1900s. I know
Yeah,
that,
yeah, I'd agree with that in terms of the stereotypical witch we view today.
yeah, because in
The term witch was around before that, but did what we did now define as a witch, which is more absolute. Yes, is certainly a later invention,
yeah,
I
because
guess you'd be willing to call it.
I know for a fact in the 1920s, the House of Seven Gables found one of these they had these glass teacups that were painted, and they were sold as souvenirs with it just had one little witch, like your stereotypical witch painting. This clearly isn't for upcoming project or anything to do with witches that I'm currently working on. But there is an influence. But I did talk about this with David Moffat at the House of Seven Gables the first time I interviewed him. Um, he uh, so undoubtedly there is an artist influence that at least comes out from one point where somebody intentionally made a witch design, and
Mm.
it wasn't a negative uh, intention, at least. I will say that it wasn't aimed to be negative. Um, but that image was already existing. I don't think it was like cartoonized or commercialized,
Mm. Mm.
because there are people as well that do talk about in the colonial period, the movie The Witch. That was the real image. That was the real hysterical fear that people saw witches as in at least colonial era America.
Yeah, well, it all has to be, you know, invention, exaggeration, and storytelling and alike, because we all know witches don't exist, or do they?
Or do they? Or do
No,
they?
well, but yes, well, it depends what you mean by witch, but certainly yes. The green-skinned lady from Oz is yes, very much made
Yeah.
up.
I'm gonna guess that's probably the biggest influence on that one.
Yes,
Uh,
yes.
the Wicked Witch of the West. Um,
Mhm.
so.
So there's a question. Did the Wicked Witch of the East have a hat like that? Because I only remember seeing her feet. I don't remember seeing her head. Because
Uh,
didn't Dorothy's house land on her?
Dorothy's house does land on
So
her.
you don't know
She
if
does
she's wearing a
die.
hat or not.
We don't
There's
know.
one
We
of those
don't know.
mysteries. One of those
We don't
mysteries of
know the
literature.
color of her skin. We don't know if she has a hat.
Hat.
We have
A
no
wide
idea.
brimmed
We
hat.
just know that her feet roll up when she dies.
Exactly. She just maybe she's wearing a beanie. I don't know. It's
Maybe she didn't wear a
a
hat.
beret. Maybe she
Maybe
didn't.
she had like a fancy hairdo.
Indeed. We will never know.
We'll never know.
How disappointing. Ah,
A letdown.
well, that isn't where
That
I expected
no
this
good
conversation to
witch.
go. Yes, that good. I didn't like her hairstyle, and so yes, that's why the house landed on her.
Why the
Mm.
house landed on her? We may never get an answer.
Mhm.
So yes, that is funny. Uh, and then that actually reminds me of uh, a Arthurian myth.
Ah,
Just
yes, yes.
reading
I
about.
remember you talking about no a little about Arthur. I'm certainly no expert, but he's a very interesting chap. If you want to talk about Arthur and
He
Arthurian
is.
myth, yeah.
I was just reading. I hadn't really had much of a fascination other than just reading the 1500s poem for the sake of reading it. But I didn't know that there were all these surrounding legends of Arthur.
No, it is this is a problem. So if you tell the story of Arthur, there's a very good chance someone will tell you your story is wrong, purely because there are so many stories of Arthur and people know different stories. Um, to me, probably the classic is Excalibur. There's a film called Excalibur, which has
There's
a
an
very young Patrick Stewart in it and Helen Mirren and alike, which is a
oh, it's
fantastic version of the story. Captures pretty much all of the evolution of it. But
it's a great Easter movie too.
yeah, but the Arthur himself, I mean, obviously probably a legend, so maybe based on a historical character. But I think the first mention we have of him is it the Godin Welsh poem where they mentioned that a hero was not as good as Arthur or not of the likes of Arthur. So he's being compared to as a sort of a warrior or a leader or something. But we certainly have no record that he was a king, not at all. And there must have been stories told about him in the fifth and sixth centuries, seventh centuries, because uh, he then next appears in is it Nis's Historia Britannium? So a history of Britain uh, talks about him having five battles, I think it is, or six battles across England at various places. And some of those battles, I believe, are analogous to the battles that Hengist and Horsa were said to have had when they conquered Britain. So in similar places. And Hengist and Horsa are legendary, but they're actually totally made up. They are based on divine twins in Germanic culture, and we've got a very good feeling of that because there are other stories with Hengist and Horsa in from Germany. So it's very unlikely that that they are the same Hengist and Horsa that then came to Britain. Plus, that Hengist and Horsa live a divine twin lifestyle that Hengist, the strongest, meaning and stallion, his name means, and Horsa is the weaker brother, also disappears in story, which tends to happen in divine twins. One, the lesser one disappears, and so you tend to just be left with the one at the end of the story. So almost certainly, on a side note, Hengist and Horsa a myth, but I think what is going on in these, and I think the history of Britain by Ninnius is, I think that was probably influenced by the Anglo-Saxon chronicles, or at least influenced by the sources that the Anglo-Saxon chronicles used, because it talks about much of the same things. There are some slight difference in details. So what's going on at that point is the Christian Anglo-Saxons at this point were trying to establish some credibility, is probably the best word to use, uh, for an origin myth of England. So why is England the shape it is? Why are the Anglo-Saxons ruling England? And so they have to create this history because there's no documents about it. And their history is there's these battles with some
Arthur
great
brought the
warriors.
Anglo-Saxons.
Arthur was pre-Anglo-Saxon. Although but this is the thing, as stories are written about him later and later, his age, where he appears in history, moves forward sort of along with it, tethered by a loose chain. Because and you can tell that because of the armor he may wear or the swords he may have, which just couldn't exist in the time he may have originally existed, if he did, in about 400. The 5th century. So yeah, that's but to say stories must have been told about it for him to appear in these histories of Britain, and then by this point, being a king or at least a leader of warriors and defeating the enemy, whoever that was at the time, Britons probably. So you're starting to get into Britons to get the Anglo-Saxons in, which again is a bit ironic, really, in terms of you want a hero of England or something. What you find from that is he must have been big because that story then develops and grows and gets to Geoffrey of Monmouth and into France, and they just keep adding a wizard like Merlin. He appears probably at the turn of the millennium, first millennium. He wasn't around, and all sorts of things have added. So the sword Excalibur, the Percival affairs, incest and all sorts of wonderful tale. It's a slight, I guess, a slight Near Eastern quality by the end of it, which would sort of make sense because of all the trade and migration. But you tend to find this sort of patricide, incestual thing going on in Near Eastern creation myths. And so here you have his father, Luther Pendragon. Luther Pendragon changing his looks, I think, to sleep with the Duke of Cornwall's wife. He changed himself to look like her husband, and that's how Arthur's born. And then Arthur then gets who is it? Is it his? I don't know. I've got to try and think because it's a complex family tree. So the Duke of Cornwall's wife then has a daughter who then possibly sleeps with Arthur as well to give birth to another child, if I remember rightly. Was that Ingrain or something, or Gawain? And Arthur has Ingrain. So yeah, there's lots of incest and weird things going on, which makes me feel that either that was the order of the day of stories, or it's only influenced from well, it was in Greek stories as well. So, but sort which were sort of agricultural, uh, Neolithic influence stories.
Well said.
No, I don't know. So that's sort of what I know. But certainly the stories we know of Arthur are pretty much completely made up. So there's it. But is there anything wrong with that? There's a really good uh, we'll talk about this in folklore circles, and Levi Strauss wrote, I think, a piece on this around why does a myth die? And the fact is that stories die if they don't remain relevant. So, and they tend to remain relevant by having details changed in them. So the plot could remain the same, but details like names of people or countries mentioned or landscapes or whatever, they would change. But if they don't change, the story becomes irrelevant and no one tells it. And that's how it can die. You know, if no one thinks, oh, that doesn't make any sense to me, it dies. But the other ways stories die is that actually they change to reflect what's going on to the point that they are no longer recognizable. So the story actually does exist, but has so mutated that it doesn't look like it exists. And you could never tell it's the same one unless you did research into that. And I would argue that the King Arthur stories we're all familiar with are not the King Arthur stories we started with. They are just totally different stories. The King Arthur story for me, Godwin, is dead. Long live the king.
Long live the king. The
The
first
king is dead, but long
and
live the king.
future king. Yeah, I think King Arthur will always be king. People try to recreate him. Kids want to grow up to be him.
Well, which him do they want to be? That's the thing.
I think
That's
when
it.
we're looking at those fun children's stories, I think that's always an influence on kids. They're like, I want to be a knight.
Yeah, pull the sword from the stone, do that
Yeah.
heroic thing.
Who doesn't want to pull the sword from the stone? Come on. Pull the sword
Exactly. I
from the
mean,
stone and you get to rule Camelot and then
go to Disneyland. They've got one. They've got a little sword in a stone feature, I think, in most of their parks.
yeah, you can't really I tried pulling it out
Yeah,
for
yeah, me too. Yeah,
20,
no,
30
it's
minutes.
rubbish. It's obviously not real because if it was, I would have been able to pull it out the stone.
I know, but I spent like a good 20 to 30 minutes trying to pull that thing out.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, those things I think as myths change, its influences are different. I can't remember who said it. It's I think because we're so fascinated with King Arthur, that's why he's always going to be the king.
But why are we fascinated with him? What is it? What is it? What he represents? Because he doesn't really represent anything great, considering how he was conceived. You know, the people he slept with. He had an affair. He had an affair with was it Guinevere, which was Lancelot's wife, his best knight. Didn't have an affair with her, and then and then he slept with his I don't know stepdaughter or whatever you call it, daughter-in-law. I don't know how it works. Some half removed, I don't know, half second. I don't know, very complicated. But yes, as well as having his own child. So it's all, and then didn't his then half son try to kill him? I don't know. It's all. Why would you want to be Arthur?
I get that if you're looking at the legitimate myths of it, but I think also with like some of these small myths we have, um, the only one that comes to mind is the Mabon at Modron. Forgive me if my Welsh is not right in that.
Mabed. Mabinogion or
The Mabon myth, where we get the word Mabon from.
um, heard of Mabinogion where Arthur's mentioned in that, which is the
Mabon,
four branches of that.
Mabon Modron, I think is the name of it.
Okay, I'm not. I don't think I'm familiar with that one then.
So it's a
Not
Welsh,
much to
it's one of
know.
the Welsh myths. I've been trying to get an original copy of it. I was reading an analysis and it gave this quote directly out of it. And in the quote, this is extraordinarily fascinating to me because this is me reading a Christian myth talking about not just Wales or England. It's also talking about Gaul,
Hmm.
and I can't remember the name. It starts AJ, that part of France. Age, it's like Agen. Then, so it's starting with talking about the pre-Christian history of those areas, and then it trails into talking about going all the way to the Middle East to Christian history, and even times before Christ. And um, the reason why it was so fascinating to me, so the Irish myth, I think it's Sherwin, where
Hmm.
this one woman hates this guy. He turns into a she's chasing after him. She wants to kill him. He turns into a pig. She turns into a bear. He turns into a salmon. She turns into a fish. He turns into a grain of hay or a strand of hay. She eats him, gets
Hmm.
pregnant, gives birth to him. Well, in this, we get a little bit of an extension on it where she gives birth to him, but now because he's her child, she can't muster the strength to kill him. So she puts him in a basket, throws him in the ocean. He gets picked up by fishermen, he's
Okay.
raised by fishermen. He now gets kidnapped. And this is just like the quick summary of it. There's like a whole other thing. There's like a part where he has to like watch a cauldron and it wasn't mixed properly, so he managed to get all the good magic stuff out of it, but the cauldron breaks and poisons this land, destroys a whole
Well,
bunch
this
of
sounds
it.
like a fantastic,
Yeah, turns into a
fantastic piece of
lake
story.
that's there in Wales. Um,
I've got lots of books on Welsh poetry.
yeah, and
Perhaps,
then
perhaps not.
yeah, and then Mabon is kidnapped. And Arthur and in this
Mhm.
story, it's not Arthur and his knights, it's Arthur and his paladins. And this is supposed to be a myth from the 500s, supposedly, uh, which would predate Charlemagne's
Oh, yeah, absolutely. But
paladins.
that's, I can't believe that's sort of 500. That's really interesting. I would love to know more about that. I don't know if I've got any. All right, so let's quick look. I can't see a name of a Welsh poem that sort of attaches to that. But I'd love to know more about that, Garrett. That sounds like a fantastic story.
It is. I'm trying to get a copy of it right
What's
now.
it? Let me know what it's. Yeah, and you don't know its exact name.
Mabon App Modron. See where it
Maybon at Modron.
is.
I have to. Ah, Maybon ap Modron, a prominent figure from Welsh Wild was the son of Modron, members of Arthur's war band. Ah, okay, so it isn't about King Arthur; it's about one of King Arthur's colleagues. Okay, excellent. All right, well, I will. You've got me interested about that. I shall see if I
I've
can find that myself.
Yeah, I've been told the two best translations are Patrick Ford and Evangeline Walden.
Okay, well, let me write that down, and if I can find them, I'll let you know. And
we can discuss further.
Well, indeed, yes. No, I'll read up on it. Read about that story.
After hearing about that, that's when I was like, okay, Arthurian legends are now cool. Not that
yeah,
they were
that's.
cool to begin with, but the fact that there's
I would be at the moment. I'm incredibly skeptical that is 6th century. Um, it's
well,
not
there's a reason
impossible.
why I use the word supposedly.
Yeah, yes, yes, yeah. I am, but I'm willing to be uh have my mind to change. But as I've got lots of books on Welsh poetry, and I don't remember that. But after this call, I will get those books out and have a look, and I'll let you know tomorrow if I've got something.
Yeah. Yeah, for me, it was specifically to me the most fascinating part about that is it's explicitly used the word paladin in it. Um, and that is a dark age right pre-night word.
I don't know where the etymology of paladin comes from, actually. That because that seems like it has a very Persian-esque feel to it, but I may be wrong.
Uh,
Paladin, perhaps it's.
I could be wrong, but the earliest I know about that is that's what Charlemagne called his knights, basically. They weren't knights, they were paladins.
Okay. Well, oh, I know. I means officer from the Greek or Latin,
Oh,
Roman.
Greek or Latin. Okay.
Ah.
So Greek in origin.
But it's like Latin's Roman, isn't it? But the Romans stole everything off the Greeks. They've got nothing original, bless them. Um, sorry, but a bold, sweeping statement on Roman culture. Sorry, I apologise, but
Hey, the Romans, they took everything they could, you know.
yeah, well, a fine civilization to a degree. Um, some things they
No,
didn't
they
do very
knew it
well.
was good, and they just knew how to capitalize off of it.
Well, yeah, well, was Christianity good?
Uh,
There's a debate for another.
Earlier
Probably not.
days a bit, I will say Christianity was good.
Okay,
After the church became
Charlemagne. Yeah,
pre-Charlemagne, I'd
Charlemagne. Yeah,
say late 200s maybe. That's when it started to get all corrupt and dirty.
yeah, yeah. Anything that gets a bit of power, it
Yeah,
gets corrupt and dirty.
as soon as money and power got involved, that's when some Christians started behaving not very Christian. And the reason why I always say the early days is because an emperor, I can't remember his name, it starts with a T, but he wrote how, like, in his own personal journal, in his own words, he talked about how angry he was that this, like, renegade group of Jews were being so good to people and taking care of people and being really actively involved in the community, but the Roman temples weren't. And he was like, why are they not doing this? Um,
Yes, that was one of the things. Yeah, I remember reading about that myself.
and
And I didn't.
I think that was probably the big rise in Christianity was in the early days. Um, it was across the board in terms of social class. People were getting really involved as
Well,
a religious
it,
practice to be good to each other.
well, okay. Let me put a twist on that for you, Garrett. I would like to say it was good salesmanship because I think it was more. If you come along to the church and listen to the sermon, we'll feed you. And so that's how it was sold, as opposed to it was a natural gift where there was, it was all give, give, give. No, no, it was definitely you have to listen to our preaching, and do the rituals with it, and then we give you food. I'm pretty sure that's how it probably would have worked.
Um, there definitely was a little bit of that in there, especially in books like the Didache, the first known Bible, which um,
Yes, I
to
bought that by
me,
the way after
there-
our last conversation.
there's parts of that I question heavily. Was that really written by a Christian or was that really written by somebody trying to make money? Um,
All religions want to make money. Oh, sorry,
I
did I
mean,
say that
all
out loud?
religions
Sorry,
want to
my
make
view.
money, but is this the first account of someone getting involved with Christianity for the sake of making money? Um,
Hmm.
because I mean, there are actual people in history like Saint Nicholas who he was legitimately interested in helping people out.
Yeah, yeah, there were
Yeah.
people like that. Indeed, yeah.
So much so, at the Council of Nicaea, he punched a guy right in the face. And he only attended because he wanted to address corruption issues within the church. Um,
Wow.
he was in every definition a salty sailor, but he had good intentions.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
I'm sure there are many people in many religions who have good intentions.
but I think after when we get into end of the 200s, that's when the real money making schemes start to come in. That's really
Yeah, yeah. Laws will start to form around religion,
That's
and
when that's
that's
when Christianity is no longer just some renegade religion.
well,
It's
and
now.
this Roman Empire, turns into the Roman Catholic Church, and if you support us, we give you money for an army so you can spread Christianity,
Mhm.
providing you swear allegiance to the Roman Catholic Church. Yes.
Similarly to how China helped produce the spread of Buddhism to control the market.
Hmm. Indeed, it's yeah, religion's a funny old game. It's a
Very, very funny old game.
funny old game. It's fascinating to watch it evolve. It's yeah, yeah. There's lots I can say on religion. Oh no,
Or
I
deep
love religion.
evolve.
Keeps me in the job, but yeah, there is it's frustration as well that I can stand back and see an evolution of religions from one to another, of stories being taken and changed and developed. Like every religion stories is just an evolution of a previous religion stories, tweaked because the last religion didn't do it quite right. And yeah, it's I don't understand how people believe it. So it's fascinating. It's fascinating why people do, and I don't quite get it.
There's a lot of baffling psychological mysteries, the enigma of religious beliefs.
Mm. I sort of get it. If I understand it's sort of the communities that are built and the helpfulness. I mean, my father converted to be a Jehovah's Witness towards the end of his life, and I met some of the people that were part of the community, and they seemed to be the most friendly, helpful, kind, thoughtful people I could have met.
Mhm.
But then, yeah, and that's a good thing. And I believe there are church communities like that. But then equally, my mother was a Christian and the Church of England, and whilst there was good community spirit, there was also a lot of backstabbing and sniping and Mrs. Miggins is friends with the priest this week. I wonder what she's doing, and all that sort of stuff going on. It isn't a lot of non-Christian, well, I consider non-Christian type
It's not Christian.
behaviors going on.
Jesus said you should like be nice to each other and take
Oh,
care of each
Jesus
other.
said so many things that were contradictory.
But
I doesn't.
there's not a lot of that really goes
Yeah,
on now, does
yeah,
there?
no,
He
no. So,
said, be good to each other, and that seems to be like the hardest thing for
hmm.
human beings is to be good to each other. Instead, we're more fascinated with
It doesn't get. Yeah, yes.
each other.
It shouldn't be hard.
It
I
shouldn't.
mean, I wish it. Yeah, it's a wonderful feeling to be kind and generous.
It is. It's nice too. I mean, I love. I always love, for some reason, charity projects always have a special place in my heart because, uh, just because of the good impact it has on people.
Yeah,
I always enjoy those things. Um, but I think it just kind of baffles me how people just become quickly so salty. as they talk about all these good, like trying to be good and this and that, and then the second you stub their toes, um, actually reminds me of this lecture I heard this one Buddhist monk give about, they'll say people will say all these things about, oh, I'm so good and I can care about people and I follow everything the Dalai Lama says, but the second you say something they disagree with, they go from Dr. Jekyll to Mr. Hyde, want to kill you.
Exactly. What is the truth?
Yeah.
That's that's a big thing. Actually, I was talking about this last week. The truth, because mythology, which is obviously my specialism, is are stories that have truths in them. But what people tend to forget is that truths don't have to be facts. There's just got to be something someone believes in. And I think that's really important today, as much as any time, that when you hear, let's say, politicians, for example, say, "Oh, this is the truth," I wish they would stop using that word and say, "This is the facts," because somehow they can get away with not saying the facts if they say it's the truth because they believe it, and that's the lesson for all mythologists in today's political climate is to get your politicians to stop using the word truth and use the word fact.
Yeah. Let's focus more on factual research. Um,
Exactly, exactly. Just because you believe it doesn't mean it is fact. But I mean that's religion. Everybody who's religious believes something that is a truth to them that other people in the world will not necessarily believe is a truth.
or something that justifies as a truth to them, or
Yeah,
the
exactly. Yeah,
truth to justify whatever feelings or non.
whatever. That Jesus turned water to wine, or was born of a virgin, or you know these sort of things. That Muhammad was visited by an angel to get the word of God. People believe that's the truth, but does it make it fact?
I still have a hard time believing those things, but
Hmm. Yes, I just
he
don't
was
because I know,
born a virgin.
as was every other major hero at the time, especially those written by the Greeks, which the New Testament was. you know, how many heroes did Zeus father that could have been considered virgin births by the mortal women who have to explain this? Yeah,
Yeah.
it's it happens all the time. These miracle births or babies turning out of nowhere in a basket.
But was it really a miracle birth? Because come on, she didn't get to have any fun to have that kid. It was just like, hey,
Well,
guess
you
what?
don't
Nine
know.
months.
Yeah, well, who knows? Well, it's yeah. There's you're not meant to question the details, are you? Because then it all unravels and unwinds, and you're left without that. I don't know what it is that religious people want to hold on to. You know, that the magic or religion. You know, if you ask the details, or they just say oh, it wasn't important, or allows you to interpret it yourself. You know, and as soon as you get interpretation, then anything goes. You know?
Just the stories. Yeah. But it's fascinating though to study nonetheless.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. It's a huge part of human history and
Yeah,
very influential.
especially the details you can find to in cultural development or merging cultures. I really like.
Hmm.
Uh, Kind of like if you were to look at as an example, like Buddhism, to see the difference culturally as it spread, uh,
Yes.
or the difference in the all the various Christian arts throughout Europe.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. You got yeah, from the Byzantines to the Roman Catholics to the Protestants, yeah, to yeah, to the thousand probably denominations or more of Christianity in America. All the various churches of whatever.
Now there's this one like popping up every other day like a gopher.
Indeed, their own private aircraft and luxury cars for the preacher in their
Yeah,
big
because
house.
apparently you need a really big house and an expensive
Exactly.
car to spread the word of God.
Indeed. And to be tax free in a charity,
Yeah,
status is
those things. When really, as long as you have a car that can get from point A to point B, I think you should be okay. Maybe
mhm.
pay economy too. That can save the church a little money also. It's a
Indeed. I mean, why did not Jesus teach us about electric vehicles back then? It would have saved a lot of hassle. But that's the thing today. The larger your platform, whatever you say, people just hear the message irrespective of what you said the day before, the week before, the month before.
or maybe it's just
So
a giant WWE show.
I was there last night, funny enough. One of the WWE wrestlers is a big history fan on
Really?
YouTube. Yes. And yeah, and presented a couple of complimentary tickets. I went with a friend of mine from Ancient Architects YouTube channel. I have known nothing about wrestling, but I went along. He knew everything, and yeah, so I got my first real taste of WWE. It was how can I put it?
Is it fun?
Entertaining, quite pantomime-esque.
Yeah,
So it probably looks really good on telly, but when you're actually there,
it doesn't
all
look
the
as good.
no, especially when a wrestler who looks absolutely dead on stage and can't move for the final like bell, as soon as the adverts start and the lights go out, they can roll off the stage, get up, and walk back to the changing room. Well, that's a it's a miracle. It's a miracle. That is
It's a miracle. Yeah, the
it is.
miracle
Oh,
of
the worst thing I saw.
WWE.
Yeah, or tag teams. I saw they had this where two people wrestle two people, but only one's allowed in the ring at a time, or like from each team, and the other one has to hold a rope and stick their hand out to be touched the other one to be able to come into the ring. That's the tag system. And so, in true entertainment and pantomime fashion, obviously one wrestler is better than the other and is teasing like that wrestler to get to the corner and he can't and he's beating him up. And his wrestler buddy trying to touch him to get tagged so he can come in and beat him up. Right, he's holding this and stretching out his arm and he's almost touching him. So what does he do? He climbs up a couple of ropes on the ring just to make sure his arm's another yard away so he can't tag him. And it's like, it's just a ridiculous, ridiculous piece of entertainment at times. That,
Yeah,
but yeah, yeah, seeing it live did ruin some of the magic I'm sure
yeah,
people would normally associate with it.
I'm pretty
But it was
sure
entertaining. It
it's
was
like
entertaining.
working
The crowd were
backstage.
cheering. There were good songs, and the British crowd were in full voice. But
Netflix trying to deal with uh,
yeah,
British insults and
exactly.
parodies.
Yes. Does the editor know what? Yeah, that these are what this English term means. But yeah, yeah, I was quite impressed with the crowd. Very entertaining. But yes, the WWE that was a religion in a way.
Yes.
Yeah.
Actually, speaking of religion, comes to mind theater, since you were talking about
Mhm.
Greeks earlier, theater and wrestling.
The same thing. What is it? Is that the question? Is it a statement?
Oh, I was just looking to transition back into the
Mm.
logical talks.
Yes. Yeah.
Does it
Yeah.
fit into, because I know that at least going all the way back to Etruscans of what we can see painted in there, of what the historians and archaeologists found within Etruscan tombs is that there's painting depictions of the importance of wrestling. Are there myths?
Oh, wrestling myths.
Yeah.
Oh, obviously, there was obviously the heroic myth of a strong man defeating someone is there. Good versus bad. Often, though, it was fighting animals, especially bulls, which you get bullfighting from. That comes from bull sacrifice. It's all part of that theatre. And well, ritual is probably a better word to call it. So religion needs ritual for the stories to be remembered. So when you when you tell a religious story about something, you would normally act it out, and that makes it easier to remember. So, and bullfighting would have, for example, in one of that where people dance around a ball. We see Mycenaeans, acrobats over a ball. So I'd imagine that kind of play would have developed into wrestling and a show of strength, maybe. Now, I don't know whether. I mean, there must have been some acting out because there's acting today as well, because you get good guys and bad guys, and sometimes the good guys win, and sometimes they let the bad guys win. But I don't know if there's actually a. I know there's a myth about wrestling, so something that I can consider a sacred story like that. I mean, that might come from the Greeks. It could be a very European one if there is one, but one doesn't spring to mind,
Because even as
Garrett.
far as I think, because wrestling
I
had
can
been perceived as pretty important. King Henry VIII lost a wrestling match to whoever the King of France was at the time. Just trying to
really,
show
because he
off
was a
his.
big lad.
Yeah, he was a good jouster, but he was not as good of a wrestler as the King of France at the time was when he held on when he pulled off his most famous tournament, most famous medieval tourney ever, as a offering of peace between England and the Holy Roman Emperor on what was considered neutral territory at the time, France. Um, and it was none of the kings were allowed to joust, but they could
Mhm.
partake in non-killing uh, contests like wrestling, and Henry was not happy about it. Um, but the thought comes to mind of wrestling. It is expressed to be greatly important in.
But no, nothing really European. Lots of maybe a bit of China, Siberia, and Mongolia. Really, Siberia, and Mongolia. There's wrestling, but I can't see any solid myths in Europe about addicted. Not those that have a religious connotation anyway.
Hmm.
So no, no, that surprise me. Perhaps there might have been wrestling within the ceremonies of religious ceremonies and ritual, but you would then if there was, you would expect there to be a story that it is enacting. You know, but no. So sorry to disappoint you. I can't really tell you the myth if there isn't one. But yeah, so that's really yeah, that surprised me. That does surprise me. I hadn't thought about it before. And you're right, wrestling is um, imagined a lot in Greek art.
Yeah.
It was a big thing. So the fact it isn't there does surprise me.
What about theater? Is there ever a theater? I know there's a god of dance in ancient Greece.
Um, no, because it's the. I mean, they may have had very specific deities for very specific actions, but I can't recall again any significant religious stories about that. As I say, the art of religion is to tell a story and perform a ritual. That's what people remember what goes on, remember how to act, remember what to say, what to sing, which in itself is theatre. Theatre is is the religious ritual. There isn't, but I don't know if there's I can't see there being a religious ritual about a ritual.
Hmm.
I don't recall that.
Okay.
So no. And the amphitheatres were very different to the temples in Greece, very separate.
Because I know that
Ex
in Rome, in the Colosseum, they were to just be normal for them to to perform myths.
yeah, myth story. Yeah, and that's the ritual act of that myth. Yeah, that's because it is a religious story. So yeah, myths are acted out as you know as they are today from the Iliad and the Odyssey of Homer, and the like. You know, they are sacred stories. They have stories of gods and heroes and the like. So and yeah, the Iliad was all about what Zeus wanted. So yeah, it's I think the representation of ritual and yeah, but you know, I'm not just talking, you know, maybe drink some wine, have some bread type rituals, but you know, the ritual was the whole storytelling process. We see that in Old Norse, especially, you know, poems like the Glimnersmul, where Odin is disguised and has to answer questions as the masked one. We're really confident that that was a ritual. Someone would have probably had a cloak and a mask and was telling a story, and at some point would unveil themselves and carry on telling the stories. You know, Odin reveals himself. So that's how stories were told before books. You know, that's it was either song or performance. Always, it was really important. I mean, there was no telly. You don't. You know, people just didn't end the day and say, "Oh, let's look at the stars and make stories up." They could have, but people would much prefer to play a tune and sing a song together. You know, and watch people act out something.
Yeah, fascinating, fascinating.
But today we watch telly. You know, we watch the television, and that's our equivalent, which is disappointing. So, you know, we don't invest in the arts. Well, especially at the moment. I don't know. You know, it's like the arts and has been really hit in this economy, which is a real shame.
It
Yeah.
is. It is.
And yet,
There's a lot of especially independent art that could probably soar much higher in terms of where it's currently at, but there's just no support system for it or foundation for it.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I don't know how we, well, you can't really fix that at the moment. I don't know what's going on with the world right now. But that's a real shame. It's a shame that, you know, I guess this has been happening so long. I think even adults today, many of them don't necessarily see the importance of art. You know, what is the benefit in learning a poem or understanding what goes on in a painting? We're brought up in a world where there are many people, most of the people I'd say in this world probably think it's of no value at all because it doesn't give any tangible outcome. But actually, there is something beautiful in being able to, you know, be able to recite a poem or to be able to look at art and really understand what it really means.
Yeah, I mean, it's also, I mean, it's not just it's not just you are looking at art history. I mean, or your history in the form of art, but you're also looking at entertainment, like going back to King Arthur being such a big popular influence amongst the young people. That's now become a myth of this noble knight, the once future king, you know, what really is the Holy Grail.
Yep,
And something that people have written books about. I mean, where is your next story that has people talking about these things so many
exactly.
years later where people are trying to understand it?
It's really, yeah, that's a good point. You know, we've gone from writing the stories though of King Arthur to writing stories about the stories. It's like we run out of ideas on the story itself, so now we're writing stories about
Or
the
people
stories.
or people are trying to create more contemporary versions for
Exactly, or where what happened? You know, is the Grail real? What happened to the Grail? I mean, look at what's it? Dan Brown's book. Um, I don't remember what it's called. You know, his famous book, Da Vinci Code. You know, what is the Holy Grail? And he rewrites that as it being the female bloodline of Christ. An interesting take on it.
yeah.
And he tries to intertwine it with vaguely half researched ideas. So, yeah, no, and you know that's a good story, and I like it. But yeah, I mean, I mean, I guess if we really wrote King Arthur's story down, it would be really dull. You know, if you take it from an academic point of view, who's King Arthur? Well, he's probably this warlord or I don't know, ruler of armies, maybe, but that's still a guess. And what did he do? Well, he probably didn't pull a sword from a stone, but he won a battle or two, and then that was taken out of all proportion, and he became legendary. Yeah. But also, you know, I guess the other thing to know about Arthur, and whether this is true, well, yeah, I don't because it may not have existed, but yeah, Arthur is just another name for bear in terms of sort of etymology in the Welsh. So is it yeah, it makes it more like a warrior story. You know, one of the old sort of berserkers you find, or you'll find the I think they call it in Greek, wolfish rage. So yeah, I don't, yeah, it's what do you do? What do we do with stories? I mean, and that's more of a folklore question with capital F. Do you when I mean stories will always change. So are you right to grab a story at a particular point in time and say, no, this is the right version of the story, but why can't stories change and be different and we continue with them? Is it because we now can see the changes that makes us feel stories are less authentic? I don't know. It's a real dilemma. It can cause all sorts of yeah, really real dilemmas for folklorists. Yeah, what are you actually collecting? You know, folklorists go out to research stories. How do you know you got the right story? How do you know when you go back which story is the original story? How do you know where, it's almost an impossible task now. And is that one of the issues we have that we have recorded so much information? When is us, you know, do stories matter? Do versions of stories matter?
Area of debate I think we'll always be discussing.
Yes. Well, that's what we say to many King Arthur stories. You know, some are better than others, but none of them are true.
What is the truth? Yeah.
That's the truth,
I
yes.
mean, who really is King? Because there's so many. I mean, there's a lot of different angles on King Arthur. One of the Irish legends is he wasn't even like the sword and stone story. He just conquered everywhere from uh, Ireland, Britain, Scotland, part of Gaul, and he was just very good at keeping the Roman. He drove out the Romans.
Yeah. See, I like to think the Romans left and he was good at, I don't know,
Yeah,
picking up the pieces, maybe.
and then there's
Uh,
a speculation that when the Western Roman Emperor fell, he became the new king of the region.
right. Also heard a story. He wore a wide brimmed hat.
Why
That's,
is that?
that's another story. That's
The story, the fashion of King Arthur
it. Yes.
by
But
John
when it
Hawley.
was surprised me, yeah, if version of that story appeared at some point and then disappeared. Although saying that, because if you look at the genealogy of kings, what they thought their genealogy was, many of them have Woden as their sort of seventh or ninth grandparent removed, sort of thing.
Woden.
Woden. So,
I mean,
yeah,
you're only relying off of what bards were telling you at that time period.
exactly. Well, there's some noting down in the early Middle Ages of genealogy, you know, of who grandparents were. And I say we see this record of nine back there being Woden, and this is in the Christian Anglo-Saxon era.
They're trying to appeal to all the crowds.
Exactly. Well, that's it. That's it.
Back then, they
That's
weren't just trying to be like, "Hey, let's get rid of these heathens." They were like, hey, let's try and get some cred
Exactly. I've got the
with the
blood of a
heathen.
Norse god in me, but yeah, I still am Christian.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Hey, it's this old version of 23 and Me.
right. That's a very open source version, as it will. It probably will be now, isn't it? 23andMe. I don't know what I'm going to do with all that data, but yeah, it's fascinating how people thought back then. I would love to understand what was going on and to have these stories that are now lost forever. Why was Arthur so popular when we had know so little about him? Although certainly you could say it's the same with Jesus. Nothing was written about Jesus for till 50 years after his death, really. So
Um,
nothing
yeah,
we
I can
can
remember
be
his name
100%
now.
Josephus. Don't tell me Josephus.
It's not Josephus.
Uh,
Oh crap. I've said his name
Paul?
before in our interviews. He was
Oh,
the first one to write as a letter something someone's letter to the Essenes
I know
and
Tacitus wrote about him to the emperor because they were doing issues in Turkey or something.
yeah,
Wasn't
but
it?
this guy he knew Jesus when he was alive and
Really?
this turd of a man talking about horrible people that followed Jesus. He defied one of Christ's teachings. He said, "Do not look to the Jews for what lessons." Actually, no, I think he just openly said no, no to that because Jesus said, "Turn to the Jews, for they have valuable lessons to teach you." And this guy just said, "Screw that."
But what? So he would have written that when? What, in 40 CE or 50 CE?
Somewhere around there.
Well,
It,
I know Paul was around 60, wasn't he? Although his letters are meant to be earlier than that. Um, yeah, okay. But still nothing was written in his lifetime about him.
Christ's lifetime? No, no, yeah, nobody wrote anything as far as we know. There's the only thing written during the time of which Christ was alive that is the Dead Sea Scrolls, and that doesn't talk about him, I think. Um, Nope, it's all after.
Hmm.
Then we have what's his name's letter to the Essenes. We have the epistles.
Yeah, Paul and
Uh,
although half of his letters are fake, which doesn't really add any help to the situation. Yeah, why would someone feel the need to fake letters? That's that's all.
that is a large
Especially
question.
Christians. We're Christians. We do good everywhere, but let's fake a letter to make us persuade people that Christ had a plan. So yeah, it's a fascinating world back then.
We lived in a very interesting time. The world used to be a much more interesting place. But I'm trying to remember all of yeah, see, because things that came out of the that are said first century, not given an exact date. Didache, Shepherd of Hermas, Epistle of Barnabas, that one first century version of the Apocrypha,
Hmm.
Testament of Solomon, and then there's like I think two more texts. I'm trying to remember. After that, after the first century, they just kind of get a little more obscure. There's different versions that come out. Um, yeah, it's not until fifth century we get a book of Mary that came out of the Nag Hammadi scriptures, which had a
What
range.
written in the 5th century is that?
Yes,
Okay.
that contained some texts. There's all found in a pot in Hammadi, Egypt. Some farmer accidentally dug
Yeah, I've
out,
heard of those. Well, I didn't realize they were so late. Okay.
and that ranged from second century to fifth.
Okay. Interesting.
The interesting part about the Book of Mary politically shows the state of which how the churches were fighting,
Hmm.
the tensions between them, the how they're all pitted up against each other. How
No change there.
yeah, but it's interesting to see it how the it's like you're looking at one of the disciples who even if you go upwards to as late as the King James Bible, who technically is the first person to say the gospel, the good word that Christ is risen, Mary, that if you go all the way back into fifth century in the Book of Mary, it's Peter that's hating on her for being a woman.
Whoa. Okay.
To say that she's not trusted, or at least in accordance with that text.
Wow. So Mary, chosen by God, should not be trusted. Doesn't it? Just saying that seems quite a flaw in the logic on that, but okay.
And yeah, and it's a book of I mean, I understand how the mysticism becomes so produced out of that becomes so extremely controversial, but uh,
Hmm.
to
Well,
even acknowledge that Mary had a book is something that like it's this polarizing. You're just gonna, if you want to watch a room just right down the middle, all go at each other's
yeah,
throats. It's just that.
yeah. Although fifth century is quite late, so you got to understand how authentic is it in terms of being Mary's word or whatever. That is even the second century is still really quite late for a book because you're in a world of without records, very few records in terms of those writing these books. A story's got to travel from the Near East to Greece to get written down over a few generations. So things have to change. It's undoubtedly things will change because these stories aren't ritualized. These stories aren't sung. These stories aren't songs or in a religious form. So they are subject to being completely changed as they you know, disperse across the northern Mediterranean. So yeah, I am a skeptical man when it comes to how authentic those stories are in relation to what actually happened.
Yeah, I mean, all of it really. I mean, when the new thing, a new text comes up, and then suddenly there's a whole argument that surrounds it.
Oh
Uh,
yes, yes, there are. I mean, because I did a video on one on Thomas, I think it was, but that wasn't until the late first millennium, and that had Jesus. He described Jesus as a child, and that obviously as a child he would throw temper tantrums and kill passers-by and other children who didn't want to play with him. It's quite a horrendous
some
manuscript.
texts, yeah, there's some texts that describe him as somebody who you could not win an argument with.
Yeah, yeah,
Drove
exactly.
his
Yes.
parents crazy.
So yeah, that's quite a thing. But yeah, it's good advice about. Yeah, I'd love to be able to capture all those stories and analyze how they changed and why they changed and the influences and what happened. It's something we will never, I don't think, ever fully understand.
Yeah.
And it's
I think to me, politics surrounding, whatever political situation was going on, I think
oh, there was a lot of that because of the Jews and the destruction of the temple in 72, wasn't it? 72 AD. That I think influenced a lot of the rise of Christianity.
man, I don't know too much about the politics surrounding the Jews at the time, of which Christianity rose, which now that you say that, that is something I do want to now look into.
Mm.
Because previously I had really just looked at whatever inner conflicts were occurring within the church or whatever external political threats towards Christian countries or nations, because um, we start to look at mass convergence uh, by force in the way that Charlemagne, because of the Moors, uh,
Hmm.
they were interested in going into Europe and just doing a good old clear cut of everything and everyone.
Mm.
Um, and then uh, it comes up again um, when Vikings had expanded into an empire. Um, but the church, in terms of its military, couldn't take it on, so they had to convert and dismantle. Um, and that stopped as a huge blow to the European slave trade. And then the Crusade. Um, I
Yeah,
can't
they
remember
started out. Mm.
his what's his name. He invaded Turkey, and he was one of the warlords at the time.
Yeah, the first Crusades were only as far as Turkey, I think. I think it was the second or third one before they started getting to the Near East proper.
The No, the second one was to reclaim.
Mm.
The one turned into a real disaster. Like, how much more land can we try and conquer? And then
Mm.
the fourth one, that's my personal favorite. That was a complete radical movement started by a bunch of children who wanted to go in and commit horrible genocidal acts. That's truly the peak insanity of
Mm.
the Crusades. And I don't think it's known though uh, as to how that one was stopped. I don't know if it just fell apart due to incompetence or, but
It just stretched too far and logistics and yeah, it's one thing destroying people, it's another thing then living in the same land when you haven't got your wives with you and families and technology. So yeah.
yeah, yeah. But yeah, that was a interesting. It's an interesting period of history. Very
Hmm.
interesting.
Yeah, well, yeah, it's all got some interesting things going on. I mean, the that Jewish temple thing I talked about is how when the Jewish temple was sacked in 72, like brought down. That's another reason Christianity succeeded because they agreed that you didn't need to worship in a temple where the Jews had to worship in a religious place. So that allowed Christianity to continue, where the Jews then lost their place of worship. Yeah, so yeah, and then say Christians then allowed females to join and children, and as you say, gave food. It was the right movement at the time. But there was an interesting um, proposition. I don't know where I heard this. Someone said to me, if you went back in time to the year naught and then replayed history, just normally, would the world end up in the same place? And they were arguing that Christianity probably had a 2% chance of succeeding, and we were just in that 2% slot in this timeline now. And almost any other replay of history would not have Christianity succeeding. So I thought it was quite interesting thought.
That is,
There's a lot of metrics in there, so I don't know, but
yeah. I mean, I can argue against that 2%. I think I had a bigger chance. Uh,
hmm,
I think though our current political religious situation would be a very different one.
yeah, it was almost certainly, yeah, the Roman Empire changing and Islam and the like, all things like that influence. Hmm.
So, yeah,
Yeah, I don't know.
the world would be different, a much different place. But I think ultimately at the end of the day, you you just have to still deal with the human factor that people are convinced, uh, and they're just not. There's always going to be people that just they'll never listen.
Well, yep, there'll always be people who want to have genocide,
Yeah,
as well as people want to be
unfortunately.
kind. Yeah, so yeah, there's always going to be a bit of a yeah, an issue. You're never going to live in peace. That's for sure. Hmm.
Just a mess. So I
It'd
think
be nice to finish this though on a positive, Garrett, and
yes,
come
maybe
to the
yeah, maybe if people wore more fun hats,
yeah, exactly.
they would be
It's the
more
future.
fun.
Indeed, you're always wearing a hat, so well, I should get, I've all got, I've got, I don't
Yeah,
know if you can see that. You've got my Sutton Hoo helmet
maybe
just
you
to the
should wear the
side.
helmet.
Well, unfortunately, I've got an exceptionally large head, Garrett, and very few things fit it, including that helmet. I do have a Panama hat when I go and watch the cricket, I think it's called, but that's about as as hat as I go. Maybe in the summer, if we have a chat, I'll don my Panama hat, and you can see that.
Okay, you can don your Panama hat. I can. I finally acquired uh, a a hat that will actually keep me cool in the summer.
Is it wide brimmed?
It is wide brimmed.
Well, then it's a fine hat, Garrett. Oh,
It's a
I'll have
wide
to say.
brimmed straw hat. So, and after years of freebies and taking generous donations of hats that are not felt but not necessarily cool like straw, I invested in my own hat for once. So,
Oh,
uh, the archive may get a little bit of a more stylish
I will look forward to the hat episode.
the hat episode,
Indeed.
the episode of hats. All right, John.
Yes,
If I don't see you beforehand, uh, I would wish you a happy Saint Drogo Day,
indeed. That's
because I know that you're a tea drinker and he is the patron
um,
saint of
shade.
coffee. So
Uh,
I wish you peace on that day.
well, that's yeah. I'm not so keen on coffee, but that's a different story. But yes, there isn't a tea drinking saint, alas. Yet, perhaps I should create one.
You should.
Hmm.
You should create the page. Actually, you should try and find the patron saint of tea. I'm pretty sure there's one.
Yes, I'm not too sure there is one. There's because I have looked for that before, but yeah. So I'll come prepared next time to we can have a segue into patron saints of tea and coffee.
Yes, we can talk about some stories involving tea and all that fun stuff. I think they just
Indeed.
found out. I know at least with coffee, they found the origins in Africa of oldest
Okay.
plants known to have the coffee bean. So I can only imagine just how cracked out cavemen were back then,
Oh yeah,
carrying
yes.
that around.
I mean, there's lots of talk that yeah, everybody talks about there being mushrooms or whatever, and people getting high in sort of earlier times, in Neolithic times and Paleolithic times. But there's much to be thought about that actually it was caffeine overdosing
I
because
think,
people talk about more about shaking and like rather than seeing
yeah,
wonderful things in their dreams.
I think honestly, if berserkers used any plants, the practitioners of the Lysa, they would have been
Yes.
more of an amphetamine type of individual than
Mm.
a magic mushroom type of individual.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, it doesn't. Yeah, that doesn't really do what you want it to do, does it? The mushroom. But there are different types of mushrooms and different processes they can go through. I mean, the drink of reindeer's urine after they've eaten particular mushrooms can have a very different effect to eating the mushroom directly.
Hmm.
So,
I will ponder on this as I make my lunch involving
the
a
patron saint
mushroom
of
in a stir
reindeer's
fry.
reindeer's urine. Yeah. And yes, and on that, great note, yes, I look forward to speaking to you very soon, Garrett.
All right,
Take
John,
care.
take care. Thank you
Toodle
again.
pip.